he said. Your birth certificate is an essential document that proves your identity, citizenship, as well as age. It is also required for many life events and services. Sometimes you may need to change your child's name or add a parent's name to it. Let's look at some of the things you need to be aware of.
For children whose father's name is not on their birth certificate, what we find is that for legal purposes, persons want inheritance. Most times we need proof of paternity. And which other way would you show that John Brown is the father of this child if his name is not on the birth certificate? It makes it much more difficult when they are supposed to be probating the will.
So my name is not on my child's birth certificate. How could I add it?
Well, there are three means by which a father's name can be added to a child's birth record. One is that he signs at the time of the registration. So if the registration is done at the hospital today, he visits the hospital to sign within the window of the mother being there and signs. Now, if it's a case where the father is not available, or he's out of Ireland, or he's otherwise engaged, then the other means by which he can add his name is by what we call a Form E. Now, this document is signed by both parents in the presence of the Justice of the Peace, and they would have submitted their IDs along with the form once it is signed. This form, though, is valid for 42 days. And it's 42 days from the date of registration. After 42 days, the form is not valid.
But my child is already 1 year old. That time has well passed. What can I do?
The next means by which the name can be added is by what we call a status form. Now, this form is utilized once the child is over 6 weeks old. Once the child is over this time frame, what it means is that you'd have to complete the status form, have it signed in the presence of the Justice of the Peace. Both parents would submit their IDs, and the father would have submitted his birth certificate. There's a cost attached to this service once a child is over 6 weeks.
I'm a full-blown adult. My father is 1 foot in the grave. Can I still add him to my birth certificate?
There are no restrictions to what time frame you can add your name. If the child is 100 and the father is still alive, then of course he can send the status form in order to add his name to the child's birth record. If the father is deceased, then it makes it a little bit more complicated because he's not here to sign. He's not here to vouch to say that he's actually the father of this child. So with that, you'd have to go through the court, do the necessary documentations in terms of affidavit and all that in order to add the father's name to the child's birth record.
My situation is a bit different. My daughter now lives overseas, but it is something that I've always wanted to do. Is it still possible?
If the child is overseas, then it would not affect the processing of that application because the requisite documents really involves the parents. So once the mother is here in the island, she can sign, and if she's not in the island, then the form is on our website. It can be pulled down, printed, completed in the presence of a notary public, and then the original is sent to us or to the applicant who will be applying for the birth certificate. Now, bear in mind that when you're adding the father's name to the child's birth record, is what we call a record updating activity. So, if it's not the child or the mother who's coming to do this application, the application should accompany a permission letter.
RGD register my son wrong and give him another man name. I need for them correct that. So how that I go?
Once it affects the child's identity in terms of who they really are, like a brown to a gray, that changes a little drastic. So of course, you know, you'd have to go through the court where DNA would have been ordered to prove the true paternity of the child, and then a court order is sent to the RGD to do the necessary changes to the birth record or to create a new birth record depending on what is ordered by the court.
My baby mother no stop growing me. Every time me tell her to add me name, it's a different issue. What me fi do?
In adding the father's particulars to the child birth record really requires the consent of both parents. So there is no two ways about it. Because only these two people can tell that, yes, I am the parent or parents of this child or children. Now, if it's a case where one parent is not consenting to adding the particulars of the father, or the mother is not consenting to adding the particulars to the child's birth record, there's not much that the RGD can do in terms of pursuing this application, because the requirement is that both of them have to sign. So mommy has to say, yes, this man is the father of the child, and this man acknowledge that, yes, I am the father of the child. Only in that way that the father's particulars can be really added to the child's birth record, because it's a declaration that you're making to say that, yes, we are the parents of this child or children.
My name is on my child's birth certificate, but the spelling is incorrect. How can I fix that?
It depends on the variation of the name. If it's a case where the father can substantiate that the name should have been spelled this way by using his birth certificate and other proof, then the RGD can treat it as a clerical error. So we first have to determine what is the name and what is the name that you require, and what evidence do you have to support the name that you really want. We've had instances where mothers show up at the hospital with more than one daddy, and we find that the truth always comes out when questions are being asked. Now, whether there is one gentleman for the KFC, one for the Burger King, one for the rent and the other miscellaneous stuff, make sure that the name that is being added to the record is the biological father of the child. So I always encourage mothers to do it right the first time, because in correcting this error, it is a very tedious process. It has to go through the court. You can't just write John Brown and then you come back to say, no, it's not John Brown, it is Tom Stokes, and we just take the pen and cross out John Brown. It cannot be done like that. It has to go through the court, where there has to be proof of who the biological father of the child is, and the only way you can determine that is through a DNA, which is quite expensive. So I usually encourage our mothers to do it right the first time.
JBN will keep you informed. Please remember to subscribe.